Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
Today, we're not just re-entering the world of Panem, we are lifting the hood on the source code.
That's right.
We're going to be diving into the philosophical, the historical, and even the mythological blueprints that author Suzanne Collins used to construct the Hunger Games.
And that really is the mission here. You already know the plot, the reaping, the arena, the mockingjay. Our goal is to get way beneath that surface.
Mm-hmm.
So we've pulled together Collins' own commentary, some of her early drafts, and a lot of critical analysis on the adaptations to show you the calculated intent behind, every major decision.
From character names to the actual layout of the country.
Exactly. This deep dive is really designed to transform how you understand the story.
And what's so striking is how specific and immediate that initial spark was. Collins herself has talked about being home one night, flipping channels.
And she saw this jarring juxtaposition that just crystallized the whole concept.
It was this moment of radical contrast, right?
Totally. On one channel, she's watching the manufactured drama of reality TV, over the top, polished, just pure entertainment.
Right.
Then she flips the channel and bang, she's hit with this harsh, real-world footage of the Iraq War. The fusion of spectacle and suffering in that one moment gave her the central idea, war packaged as entertainment.
Okay, let's unpack that political foundation, because Collins wasn't just, observing current events. At the time, she was actually finishing her other series.
The Underling Chronicles, yeah.
Her 5th book.
And she'd made this very conscious decision that her next major work needed to grapple with just war theory, but aim specifically at a young audience.
And that's where the philosophical weight really comes in. Just war theory is this ancient framework trying to define two moral necessities when it comes to conflict.
The why and the how.
The why and the how, exactly.
Right.
First, you have jus ad bellum, the moral right or the why of even waging a war. And second, you've got jus in bello, acceptable conduct, or the how during and after the fighting. And in Panem, the answer to the jus ad bellum part, the justification for the districts to rebel, it seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it?
It does. The capital is a textbook totalitarian regime. It enforces slave labor. It extracts all the wealth, denies basic human rights.
And demands an annual blood tribute of children. That's a pretty clear case for a just rebellion.
Precisely. But what Collins does so brilliantly is she forces us to confront the consequences. And that's where the complexity of jus in bello comes in.
Okay.
It's not enough to have a good reason to fight. Your methods have to remain moral. The rebellion starts out justly. But as we see with the tactics from District 13, and especially from Almacoin, that moral high ground gets slippery fast.
We're asked to look at whether the means justify the ends.
Even in a righteous war, it's a crucial distinction.
But before we get to the morality of the revolution itself, let's talk about the world. Collins was a huge enthusiast of Greek mythology.
Oh, yeah, and she connected the games immediately to the myth of Theseus.
The parallel is almost perfect.
It really is. Athens, after losing a war with Crete, was punished by being forced to send 7 boys and 7 girls in a lottery.
The reaping.
The reaping to be sacrificed to the Minotaur. It's this ancient mechanism of political control through forced tribute.
But here's where this fantastic little detail shifts the entire world building. Collins was reading a novel, Mary Renault's The King Must Die.
Which reinterprets that myth.
Exactly. In Renault's version, the labyrinth isn't some maze. It's an arena, the bull court, used for an elite sport of bull leaping that ended in death or exhaustion.
And that single idea solidified the structure for Collins. The Hunger Games needed to be an arena, a place of visible, controlled slaughter for elite consumption, not a confusing maze.
So if Theseus provided the mythological blueprint for the setting, the historical bedrock came from gladiator rebellions.
The Spartacus connection, which is just fantastic. Collins was fascinated by gladiator movies, and she'd grown up reading history with her father, who was a historian.
Right, he taught political science at West Point. She specifically mentioned reading passages from Plutarch's Life of Crassus about the Third Servile War.
And the entire arc of the trilogy is a mirror of that rebellion. It's the story of a person Spartacus, or Katniss, forced to be a gladiator and entertainer, who then uses that visibility to spark a mass revolt. It's a classic narrative engine.
And that connection to war was always deeply personal for her. She noted that when she was young, very few books really dealt with the reality of war and how it affects civilians.
Right.
She grew up steeped in military history from her dad. But the one young adult book that really stuck with her was Boris by Job Trhar.
About the siege of Leningrad.
Yeah, the horrific siege of Leningrad in World War II. And that Boris reference is more than just trivia, isn't it? It ties directly into the hunger of the games.
It absolutely does. The siege of Leningrad involved the weaponization of starvation against a civilian population. That focus on how war affects everyday people, often through deprivation, is the lens she carried straight into Panem.
It also kind of foreshadows her big thematic concerns. In her other series, the protagonist Gregor, he ultimately breaks his sword to try and stop the cycle of violence.
Whereas Katniss uses violence to stop the institution.
So we see her wrestling with that duality right from the start.
Exactly right. That moral puzzle, when is violence justified to achieve peace? That's the spine of everything she writes.
So let's move on to the central figure herself.
Yeah.
Katniss. Collins said the character just appeared to her, almost fully formed.
Standing by a bed with her bow and arrow. And that choice of weapon was very strategic. It speaks to resilience and capability. A bow and arrow is something that can be handmade and used from a distance, which is useful for survival in the woods and for fighting peacekeepers you don't want to get close to.
And the name is just a testament to the level of research. Katniss, from the arrowhead plant.
The edible tubers were for survival, the leaves for defense, and its Latin name links to Sagittarius, the archer.
It's a great piece of world building.
Though we should all be thankful she rejected the other names she found, like swamp potato or duck potato Everdeen.
I think we can all agree on that. Now, for her voice, Collins was actually planning on using a third-person perspective.
But the story just wouldn't let her. It poured out in first person as if Katniss herself was claiming the narrative.
And it's delivered with this specific District 12 regionalism.
Which is a quiet but really meaningful form of defiance. They speak plainly, sometimes poorly, and they avoid that hyper-articulate, polished, kind of ridiculous way the Capitol citizens speak.
Like Effie Trinket.
Exactly like Effie Trinket. It's a subtle refusal to assimilate.
And the status of District 12 is so important to her developing her skills. Collins conceived of Panem with 13 districts, a clear nod to the 13 original colonies.
And each one is defined by an industry, like that old board game, Game of the States.
Right, and she deliberately designed District 12 to be the poorest, most neglected one, the joke district.
And that obscurity, that poverty, is what saves Katniss. Because District 12 was so small and ignored, law enforcement was just lax. The Capitol didn't care enough to enforce the rules.
So that allowed her and Gale to slip into the woods, the one place weapons were forbidden, and develop those hunting skills.
Skills that were unthinkable in a highly militarized district like 11. Her vulnerability became her greatest strength.
Okay, turning to the antagonist, President Snow. The name Snow obviously signifies coldness, but Collins also said it relates to a sort of perverse purity of thought.
The man who genuinely believes his pure, ruthless evil is necessary to preserve the state.
And we can't talk about his name without bringing up his first name, Coriolanus.
It's a direct reference to the anti-populist character in Shakespeare's play, which was itself derived from Plutarch. Coriolanus was this arrogant, brilliant commander who just despised the common people.
He saw himself as essential to the state's survival, no matter the cost to everyone else.
That is Snow, distilled, the self-justifying authoritarian.
And what's truly fascinating, according to Collins, is the mutual obsession that develops between him and Katniss. Snow recognizes her as this worthy opponent who's going to test the integrity of his fortress.
And they become so focused on each other, the ultimate hero and the ultimate villain, that they're both blinded to the larger manipulations happening all around them.
Which leads us directly into the political complexity of the series.
Which is often misunderstood.
Yes. The Peeta and Gale dynamic is almost always discussed as a love triangle, but the sources are very clear that Collins designed it as an ideological debate.
It's rooted in just war theory. It's the violence versus diplomacy debate.
Gale, hardened by injustice, favors violent remedies forced to get freedom.
And Peeta, who's compassionate and diplomatic, is constantly seeking a peaceful, non-violent solution.
So when Katniss chooses Peeta in the end, she's actually choosing her philosophy. But here's where I have to push back a little. Was she entirely successful in just limiting it to philosophy?
That's a fair point.
I mean, the romantic element is so central to the narrative engine of the first two books. It fuels the spectacle the Capitol craves.
No, you're right, it does. The romance provides the dramatic fuel to keep the audience, both us, the readers, and Capitol audience, hooked. But if you strip away the kissing, the core conflict is still there.
How do we rebuild after massive injustice?
Do we use the same tools of oppression, violence, revenge that were used against us, or do we try something new?
And nothing hammers home the devastating price of that conflict more than Prim's death. The dramatic question in the very first chapter is, can Katniss save Prim?
And she keeps you hanging on that for 3 books.
Until the most brutal answer possible. Prim's death, by bombs possibly deployed by the rebellion itself, proves that the initial sacrifice was futile.
It proves that no one is safe while the arena exists.
And that's the psychological devastation. The arena isn't just some venue in the capital anymore. It has expanded to cover all of Panem.
Making every single civilian vulnerable. The danger she tried to eliminate by volunteering just got transformed and amplified.
And this tragedy is mirrored in Haymitch, isn't it? The damaged mentor.
He is a walking cautionary tale. He was completely destroyed by his experience in the second quarter quell, and he copes with severe PTSD through self-medication.
He's the warning of what violence costs the survivors, what Katniss could become.
And he is broken. He's completely broken until Katniss volunteers for Prim. That single moment of pure, selfless choice, the opposite of what the games want, that's what sparks his belief that the games can actually be ended.
But this leads us right into the heart of this deep dive.
Yeah.
The realization that the victors are always, ultimately, just political pawns.
Right. The games exist as a political tool to quell insurrection. But by the 75th games, the players change. Haymitch, Coin, Plutarch Heavensbee, they orchestrate the quarter quell.
The specific rule changes, the mentors they picked.
All with the primary goal of extracting Katniss to use her as the political face of the revolution. She's a symbol created by design, and she's often left completely in the dark.
And the irony just builds to this devastating peak. Snow uses Peeta as his pawn to break Katniss. Coin uses Katniss to take down Snow.
And in the end, the ultimate act of the revolution ending the games is performed by Katniss assassinating Coin, an unarmed woman, using the very violence the war was supposed to end.
It's a vicious cycle. And propaganda is the lubricant.
Plutarch's strategy is the airtime assault. Whoever controls the airwaves controls the power. And Collins makes it very clear that spectacle is the tool of control, whether for oppression or for revolution.
Cinna and Caesar Flickerman are perfect examples of this, right?
The perfect duality. Cinna uses spectacle, the flames, the Mockingjay costume, to incite a righteous emotional rebellion.
While Caesar uses spectacle, the interviews, the commentary, to maintain the myth of the glorious, entertaining games, and by doing that, he maintains the oppression.
They both manage emotion, which is the heart of political control.
And just to link back to the historical references, the name Hunger Games. You mentioned she cites the Siege of Leningrad.
She does, and she goes further, citing Shakespeare's Henry V. The chorus notes that famine, sword, and fire are Mars's dogs of war, and famine leads the pack.
So food isn't just scarce in Panem.
No, it's a lethal weapon wielded by the capital to control every single district.
Okay, let's pivot to the film adaptations. They did a fantastic job translating this complexity, but they had to make some crucial structural changes.
Mostly due to the shift in perspective.
Right. The book's power is in its strict first-person narrative. We only know what Katniss knows, which makes her a classic unreliable narrator.
She's often misunderstanding political moves or even Peeta's motives. The films, by necessity, use a third-person perspective,
Which fundamentally changes the tension. The films add these crucial scenes: Snow in his office, the game makers planning traps, the open revolt in District 11 after Rue's death.
all things Katniss in the book couldn't possibly have witnessed. It reduces the psychological pressure on the audience, but it does allow for political context the book could only hint at.
That perspective shift also influences how Katniss is portrayed.
It does. Book Katniss is generally tougher, slower to trust, and much more manipulative, especially with Peeta when she thinks it will help them survive.
Movie Katniss is softer.
She's softer, maybe to make her a more likable heroine for a wider audience. She's quicker to emote, less calculating.
We see some important plot changes, too, that reduce the physical cost of war. In the first movie, Peeta avoids having his leg amputated after the mutation attack.
Right, which is a huge deal in the books. He uses a prosthetic leg for the rest of the trilogy, a lasting physical symbol of the game's trauma which the movies just discard in Catching Fire.
And of course, splitting Mockingjay into 2 films meant they could dramatically show Peeta's rescue mission on screen.
Whereas in the book, Katniss is completely removed from that. She only hears about the harrowing events after the fact, so suspense is traded for action.
We also can't overlook the impact of real-world tragedy on the production.
The death of Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Yeah. His death meant that Plutarch Heavensbee's role was significantly compressed in Mockingjay Part 2. Key plot information he should have delivered had to be awkwardly moved into a letter read by Haymitch.
Which kind of mutes Plutarch's ultimate manipulative role a little bit.
And one final character distinction, Coin. One source notes that in the films, Coin is depicted as more outwardly sympathetic and trustworthy than she is in the books.
In the books, her ruthlessness is evident much, much sooner.
So that shift makes Katniss's final, pivotal choice, the assassination, far more shocking for viewers who didn't have the benefit of Katniss's internal paranoia.
So, what does this all mean when we step back? Collins insisted that the trilogy is, first and foremost, a war story, not just a dystopia.
Right. It uses those mythological and historical foundations to force you, the reader, to confront the complexities of human rights, political revolution, and the definition of a just war.
And the series resonated globally because those themes, vast inequality, the system weaponizing spectacle, the fight over human rights, environmental destruction, they tap directly into our collective current anxieties about the future.
And that brings us back to the ultimate choice. Collins lays out two potential anti-violence solutions in her work. Gregor, who physically breaks his weapon to interrupt the cycle of violence.
And Katniss, who uses a definitive violent act assassinating Coin to destroy the institution of the games forever.
The question for you, the well-informed listener, is this. When does force stop the cycle of violence, and when does it merely perpetuate it?
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the underlying philosophy of Panem.
And may the odds be ever in your favor.